So next up we have our first presenter, Allison Hewitt Ward, presenting Food Fights, A History of Vandalism as Activism in Art Museums.
Hi, my name is Allison Hewitt Ward. I'm an art critic and faculty member here at the School of Visual Arts and now an MA holder in design criticism. 15 years ago, I saw David Graeber, the anarchist sociologist, give a talk at this very podium, and he began by asking, why don't we have flying cars? Why did the Jetsons not become reality? Why did that promise of a future where robots did the dishes for us not come to pass? Capitalism is a large part of that answer, of course, but that concept of broken promises and the self-undermining character of society has stuck with me ever since, which makes it very satisfying to speak at this podium myself. They're asking which is more important, art or food? Since two members of activist group Just Stop Oil splashed a can of Heinz tomato soup on a Van Gogh sunflower painting at London's National Gallery on October 14th, 2022, at least 20 artworks in Europe and North America have been similarly ambushed, usually with foodstuffs, sometimes with paint. This is in the name of climate activism. Each national group has a different demand. Here in the United States, they demand that Biden declare a climate emergency and rally government forces to that. What that would actually mean, they're a little less clear on. All of the artworks that they choose to efface are well known, kitschified by a century of photographic reproduction. I'm showing you this to shock you. They're shocking. And to open up a consideration of museums in a different way. Violence against museums is jarring for the same reason that the notion of shooting a puppy is more viscerally upsetting than shooting a person. What did the puppy do? To most of the public, museums fall somewhere on the spectrum between irrelevance, school field trips, and ideally a pleasant afternoon, more anodyne than adversarial. Opinions of and about art museums are not worth much in a world of real suffering and real problems and real crises, my own included. But as horizons of political possibility recede, denying human beings a meaningful say in our own future, museums become playhouses for the political contentions that cannot be made in the domain of politics. For that purpose, they make a very poor showing. A Dutch museum director recently said, "The museum is built on a lie. It's built on identity that comes from a highly specific identity that is white, male, heterosexual, ableist, highly educated, wealthy, and so on. But the museum was not built on a lie. It was built on a promise that languished unfulfilled until its concept took on the cruel grimace of Dorian Gray's portrait. Our present has failed to fulfill that promise the same way it's failed to deliver us flying cars." So what was that promise? It was formed in the French Revolution at the end of the 18th century. This is a rendering of the future Grand Gallery of the Musée du Louvre by the artist Hubert Robert. In the French Revolution, the bourgeoisie, the third estate, overthrew the first and second estates, the aristocracy and the church, which left them with a bunch of stuff and buildings, and they had to do something with it. And while there was an initial impulse to destroy it because of what it represented, which was everything that they overthrew, everything that dominated and oppressed them, several key figures came out to save these items and put them in something that would become the first public museum. In this rendering by Robert, it fades into a utopian single-point hazy eternity. He's bothered to depict people of distinctly different classes and colors in his museum, and the sealed-off character gives it a laboratory sense that we might be able to figure out a better way to live in this space. The artist Jacques-Louis David actually lived in the Louvre while they were converting it from a palace to a museum, and was one of the main architects of the project. He would write, all individuals useful to society will be joined together as one. You will see the president of the executive committee in step with the blacksmith, the mayor with his sash besides the butcher or the mason, the black African who differs only in color next to the white European. David made this famous drawing of the tennis court oath, which was the moment of rupture of the French Revolution in 1789. And I want to point out a key figure at the very center here. This is the Abbé Henri Grégoire. You can tell that over the weekend I discovered that you can do little cutouts on Keynote. It's really, really cool work, if I may say so myself. So you can see him with his arms around these two other men, uniting them. Grégoire's career began, he rose to national fame when he won an essay contest writing about the emancipation of the Jews in France. He was a vocal and leading supporter of the Haitian Revolution and the abolition of slavery in the French Empire. He also invented vandalism. Well, he invented the word. He said, I coined the word to kill the thing. The 20th century is very sorry, and 21st century. But to him, the prohibition of vandalism, killing vandalism, was a central part of the Project of Freedom. It wasn't totally out of step with his work on emancipation of peoples, because for Grégoire, freedom in a free society is desirable, and in order to be free, you have to be free to create. And in order to be free to create, you can't have your stuff destroyed as soon as you make it. You can't have one individual decide that they know best what deserves to exist and what doesn't, or even a government. Freedom requires free creation. On the opening day of the Louvre, on the first anniversary of the complete toppling of the monarchy, David designed this festival where citizens moved around Paris to various stations that appropriated the symbolism of Egypt and the classical world, and even some Catholic imagery. They would do things like drink from the teat of Republican spirit to wash themselves clean of the Ancien Régime. The French Revolution was really kooky. And before they were deposited at the Louvre, the First French Republic established the museum as a life-size utopia that pointed toward the future. In the Second Empire, it took on a nationalist character pointing towards the past. It became guardian of the material culture that was crumbling in the industrial age. Across the pond, American museums mimicked the architecture. They appropriated the design of their European counterparts. They literally imported culture, but had little of their successors' revolutionary flair. Transformative politics throughout the 19th century and into the 20th paid little attention to museums. They had a world to win. They were seizing states. Museums became sites of struggle for the New Left in the 1960s. Reeling from the failure of the 1917 Russian Revolution and the catastrophe of fascism, the New Left substituted students for the proletariat as the revolutionary subject, and cultural institutions for the state as their sites of struggle. Museum transformations would no longer follow revolution. They would be its vanguard. This is Robert Morris leading the art strike in 1970, where activists began to connect larger social problems to the funding and representation that exists in museums. The strategy has yet to succeed. Activists petition museums for justice denied by reality. A painting must be evacuated, a board member must be nixed, an apology must be made, a political statement must be issued. In 2019, activists rallied around the Whitney Museum's what they called tear gas biennial for the expulsion of board member Warren Kanders. He was a stakeholder in a company that produced tear gas that was used in Gaza. Kanders did eventually resign, but the tear gas production never stopped, and as we've seen, this situation has gotten considerably worse. Protests led by Nan Golden at museums around the world led to the removal of the name of the Sattler family from galleries. The Sattlers pretty much caused the opioid crisis. And it did put some public pressure into prosecuting the Sattlers, but most of the fines that they were made to pay and things that they were made to give up were just reinvested in shell companies. So what of the supers? They are appropriating this history of museums as sites of protest for things that don't apparently have anything to do with museums. But they're really something new for two reasons. Their scripted theatrical faux effacement of works of art in art museums is a new entry in the lexicon of museum protest. It doesn't bother to really link what they're effacing with what they have a problem with. You know, it's oil paintings, but, you know, they're not made with crude oil. It's the spectacular performative politics of the social media age, mimed in 3 dimensions before returning to its natural 2D habitat of likes and shares. Activists play the drama of the toddler on the high chair, flinging pureed food in anger, then gluing themselves to the object of rage and desire, mommy. The efficacy, if there is any, of the gesture relies both on cited museum gallery and dispersed image. Without museum goers, phone in hand with camera ready, it would be a wasted effort. Museums have spent the past decade rolling back no photos policies and developing social media strategies. Well, it seems they work very well. So as protest design, this is extremely effective at getting media attention. This was on the evening news all over the world. But it's very bad at gaining support for their goals. We now have multiple polls showing how much people hate this. People support climate change measures less after these. In this one they polled with the ATSE's Democrats and Republicans. You can see that the one thing that crosses the American political divide that we can all agree on is that we really hate the supers. So if you have like an estranged Republican uncle and you want to reconnect, you can call him and talk about this. You'll agree. But to be a little more serious, and to return to this beautiful hazy utopia, T.J. Clark wrote that the role of modernism was to, quote, make the endlessness of the ending bearable by time and again imagining it had taken place. Rather than imagining an ending of the unbearable end of history, the supers act it out, performing time and time and again a passion play of finitude. They never actually destroy the paintings. They only choose artworks protected by glass. But after each performance, the tomb opens and the task of humanity remains. The performance of politics in museums is dually flawed. First, these activities re-entrench the stalemate of the present by providing false relief and anesthetic from the real discontents that only continue to fester. Second, by plunging museums into the world of practical life, the performances obscure this utopian character of museums, what they might have been, the promise that was unfulfilled, and flatten their history onto a matrix of present discontents. Climate change deserves a more serious response. Humanity deserves better. Our task is to address climate change, but also to seize the freedom that was imagined by figures like Grégoire and David. It deserves more than a can of soup. Thank you.